Hello, so today we are going to take a look at different functions that Kotlin strings support, and I'm going to focus on a couple of functions that most people are probably not familiar with. Yes, I hope this video is useful. Okay, so the first one is removePrefix. So you can actually use it to just specify the prefix you want to remove, and then you pass that you pass your overall string, and then you call removePrefix. So for example, here we have this hello world, and we want to remove the prefix double star. Okay, so let's just comment this line and see what happens, and we should get the hello words. Okay, let me just for a second comment these unrelated ones, and let's run this. Okay, so you can see it removes it. And in the same way, Kotlin again does the principle of always providing what you would expect. And so since we have removePrefix, we should have removeSuffix, right? And that's exactly what this one does. And we should get both as expected. So here, if we do removeSuffix, actually, that's what we are looking for. And let's run it. And what we expect happens, okay? Now, in the same way that you have prefix and suffix, you can also remove surrounding. So that's for cases where you have the same string to the left and to the right, and you want to remove both at the same time. And so, for example, here we have this hello world with double stars to the left and to the right. And so we say that we want to remove surrounding for both prefix and suffix, right? And so we just do the surrounding, we call it once, and then we do double string, because the alternative would have been to do something like this and then remove prefix like this, and then remove suffix like this, right? Suffix, right? Like this. And that's a little bit ugly, and so Kotlin has this remove surrounding for that. And so if we run this again, we should expect to get hello world. And that does work. Now, let's say sometimes maybe you have the prefix and the suffix are not the same, but you don't want to call this also 2 times, right? You can do both at the same time. So for example, here the prefix is these pipe characters, and then just these dash things here for the suffix. So we can use remove surrounding still, but we can specify different prefix in the different suffix, right? And so if we do that, run this, we should get hello world. And that also works, okay? Now, the other thing I want to touch on is with different string functions like equals, contains, startsWith, endsWith, sometimes if you have 2 strings that may not have the same case, so maybe one of them has some character that is a lowercase and the other one has it an uppercase, but still for your check you want to ignore the casing, right? So let's say, for example, I have name George with only the first letter being uppercase, and then I have George with this G here being uppercase as well, right? And so I want to check if both are equal, ignoring the case. So if you may think to do it like this, right, by doing just lowercase on each one of them and then checking if they are equal. This works fine. So this should work fine, right? We should still get true, and that's what we get here. But the problem is that if we take a look at lowercase and go all the way to the call here, you can see it actually creates a new string object. And so depending on how many you have, this can be slightly more overhead, and so and also not very readable, because you would have to read the entire thing, and I just find it not readable, because you want to check if they are equal, and this lowercase just gets in the way. And so alternatively you can use equals, and equals has ignoreCase, where it will ignore the case here. So if we run it, we should get true, and if we switch to false, it should be false. When we are not ignoring the case, it should be false, and that's exactly what happens, okay? So pretty much there, covered that. The other thing is, it's not only equals, it's in most string functions that check things, you can use this ignore case. So let's say, for example, I have this hello world, I want to check if it contains W and then O uppercase, right? So without ignore case, this should return false, right? Because we have W, but this O is lowercase. But if we want to check it ignoring the lowercase, ignoring the casing, then we could just, in the same way we did with equals, we can provide ignore case here. And this should work fine now. And that does work fine. So now it matches WO here with this one. And if we even do it like this, it should still match it. Okay. Another thing is also in the same way that we have this ignore case with equals and with contains, we do have it with the endsWith and startsWith, right? So for example, here I have this package name and I want to check if it ends with a suffix that has that feature. It does, but here I have U as uppercase, but here it's lowercase. So we need to do ignore case true to see, to make it ignore the fact that this one is uppercase, right? And so this does return true. Similarly, startsWith also has it, and so we can check if it starts with com, and then here we have C uppercase, ignore case equal to true. Yeah, but you get the idea. In most function call, the string checks, functions that check strings, you should have ignore case. And I really like this about Kotlin, the fact that it tries to not surprise you and gives you symmetry in both the functions, like here startsWith and endsWith, and symmetry also in terms of the parameters here. So yeah, even the fact that startsWith and endsWith have this ignore case, if contains did have it and they didn't, that would be a little bit odd, right? And so yeah, Kotlin is really good in that respect. Cool. So one other thing I want to mention is also joinToString, which it has a couple of nice properties. So let's say we have a list of groceries, right? Like 1 egg, 2 bottles of water, 3 onions, stuff like that. We can tell it to join them, right? With and by default it will join with a comma. But let's say we want to limit to 2 or 3, and then once we limit, for the rest, we want to just replace with something like end more or something like etc. You can also use, right? And so this basically means once we reach the limit and we have more elements, we want to add this value instead, right? So let's run this and see what happens. So you can see we get 1 egg, 2 bottles of water, but we reach the limit, and so we add end more for them. What happens if we remove and we have only 2 elements? What we expect exactly does happen, right? Because there are no more elements, this doesn't get added, okay? But if we add our other elements again, it should get added. Okay. Now there is even more other parameters you can use here. So for example, if you want to surround your whatever string you join with some other values, right? Maybe you want to have a prefix or both a prefix and a postfix, right? And so this should work fine as well with joinToString. Let's see what's the problem. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you could maybe use add a double quote or a single quote or something. The other thing I want to show here with joinToString is so we already saw truncated. So here I have a list of car, airplane, and a bike. But the interesting thing here is that you can customize the separator. It doesn't have to be always a comma. Yeah, so that's another thing here. The other thing is that joinToString also can be passed a transformation. So let's say, for example, I have a list of translations for these examples. So for car in French is voiture, and then airplane, avion, and then bike, vélo, right? So we have these translations. And what we do is we take the examples that we have here. We still want to join them with a comma operator. This is the default, by the way, so feel free to skip it, right? But we want to get the translation and then join the translation, right? So we should expect to see voiture, comma, avion, comma, vélo, right? And so that's exactly what happens here, okay? Yeah, so that's, I think, a pretty good set of functions that you can use whenever you are manipulating strings or text. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for today's video. Please like and subscribe, and see you on the next one. Bye.